Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Now, we are a weekly podcast focusing on the paranormal, the supernatural, and the metaphysical. Now, join us for thought-provoking discussions on paranormal phenomena, conspiracies, and all things unexplained as we talk to researchers and investigators about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs and aliens, urban legends, cryptids, and so much more. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching and or listening, and we hope to see you for the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. So grab yourself a drink and a snack. Turn the lights off on the way back. Find yourself a nice comfy spot and enjoy this episode of Paranomaly. Stay with us, folks. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in tonight for this episode with Byron Lacy. Now, Byron is an abductee, and this story is very fascinating and interesting. And Byron, thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your experience with us. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 74 years old. I'm a fourth generation Texan. I'm also a fourth generation abductee. I've got a degree in English and 2 degrees in art. I've been a professional artist. I've worked for Child Protective Services as an investigator. I've done quite a few different kinds of jobs. I'm retired now, and I work on art and music.
Now, Byron, let me ask this question. Now, before we even discuss any of this story, have you had any kind of like paranormal type of things as a child growing up? Maybe ghost type of things, anything like that? Or is this something that just kind of happened out of the blue?
Well, I had the first meeting with the aliens in my room when I was 6 years old. I became sick when I was 1 year old, and they found out finally when I was 2.5 that I had a sarcoma, a cancer, and the doctor did not expect me to live. And when he found out, and they scheduled me for an operation the very next week, and they told my parents that they should go have another child to lessen the blow for when I did die.
And in hindsight of your, I was just going to say, in hindsight of your, because you're going to talk about, I think, during this narrative, a number of close call accidents where you should have died, but you did not die. In light of all of these, this early brush with death with this sarcoma cancer was certainly connected with that, and was certainly something anomalous that you survived that.
I've had lots of strange things that happened all of my life. And the explanation was always, God has saved you, your guardian angel has saved you. And then when we got into the 70s, your spirit guide saved you, different things like that. But in 2009, I figured out the real source of everything.
And which is not uncommon, and is not uncommon with abductees. I've actually said on the show before, and I really do believe this, there are some people And some of these are abductees, and maybe some aren't abductees, and they're just people that they have taken an interest in or are connected with somehow. There are some people that they just will not let die. Numerous things can happen to you and continue to happen to you, and they will intervene. Something will intervene on every occasion and save your life. And it's a funny thing that some people just can't die, but I'm convinced of it now. I've just heard so many stories like this. They want to keep some people alive. Abductees, we can fathom why. They have an interest in whatever it may be, and keeping you healthy. Either you've got a spiritual mission, some people feel, or either you are, being used to participate in maybe the hybrid program, and they want to keep you alive for that reason, or they need you for genetic harvesting or whatever it may be, but they have some kind of interest in keeping abductees alive. And Byron is definitely one of these. Let's move into the early, I think 1956, right? Initial encounter with the beings. Go ahead and tell the story in the full breadth of detail. I'm getting that echo.
My mother would always take me to bed at that time in my life and tuck me in and say goodnight and leave the room. Well, one night she took me in, tucked me in, said goodnight to me, kissed me on the forehead, and left the room. And I was watching her leave. And after she walked out into the hall, after she left, I turned around, and there were three little men standing on the side of the bed at the foot of the bed. And the mattress came up to about here on them. It was a real old bed. It was iron posts. It was from the early 1900s. We'd gotten it from my grandmother's house. And I was shocked. I had never seen anything like this before, and I couldn't figure out how they were in my room. And I yelled for my mother, and I turned around and watched the door, and she came in, and they were gone. So she tucked me back in, said I needed to go to sleep. She didn't tell me I was dreaming. She didn't say anything like that. Then I went to sleep.
Before you go on to the next night, exactly the same thing the next night. Describe the beings real quick. Were these your typical small grays that people see most often, or was it dark, or were you able to get a good sighting of what they looked like, or did you interpret them because you would never expect aliens? Did you just interpret them as small people, or what did they look like to you at that time?
One of them looked sort of flatter than the others, flatter front to back. And he would change. And this happened over the second night too. He would sort of change, and suddenly he'd look a lot like a doll made out of cloth with stitched eyes. But then he would change back to these big eyes. Now the other two, they didn't switch or change at all. And after getting a lot of knowledge about this, I think he was trying to influence my brain, except it wasn't working at that point. I didn't notice. I just took it for granted that they had clothes on because they were gray instead of pink. And they didn't have any hair. Now, they did not look cruel. I've seen depictions of the grays that look cruel or mean. They didn't look. They looked neutral. Their looks didn't scare me, except that they were just so different.
I find that puzzling. Yeah, how some people just find the grays utterly terrifying. Just the eyes just strike terror into them. Just they're just driven to just the maximum fear. Just from the sight of the eyes. Now, did these have large? I guess the eyes, they were dissimulating, meaning that they were,
They look
in my opinion, they were psychically interfering with your perceptual hardware and
trying
making
to.
you, which they tend to do a lot, particularly with children. Remember, Todd, when we spoke with John Carpenter, very
Yes.
common with child abductees. They make themselves appear, fuzzy and like animals or something, to disarm the child. Or to associate themselves with something that the child finds positive. John Carpenter felt that these early initial encounters were to kind of ingratiate themselves with the abductee, to make the abductee feel comfortable with the ETs. Do you feel like something similar to that was happening
I
in these
think the
19?
one with the doll. Plus,
Mhm.
their eyes did look like aviator sunglasses, except they were in their face instead of out on glass frames. They were big. They had big, dark eyes with no pupils and no white.
Hmm. Interesting. And so go on with what happened. So there was the night immediately after the first night, they came again, and they came immediately after your mother closes. That's an interesting detail as well. Immediately after your mother leaves the room, they are there.
They came
That quick.
back.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the first time. But she came in and um, it was the whole thing was the same, and they left. She left. Then the third night, the same thing happened. Only when she came in the room, she sat down on the bed and she said, "Son, if they come back, I don't want you to call me because they're just going to be gone when I get here. So you're going to have to learn to deal with them yourself."
Mhm.
And that was stranger than seeing them because she's like implying that they're
Mhm.
going to be back. Really, I have to deal with them. I didn't even know what the heck they were. But she
It.
gives me this speech.
Mhm.
She leaves the room, and I turn around, and they're back. Only this time, over in the edge of the room, there's a almost 7 foot tall being that had a large head and two eyes on the sides, and he was wearing a robe, and it almost looked like a paisley robe, but I don't think that was actually the pattern. And no, that was later. He
This was
was
the pirate,
wearing
right? This one looked like a pirate,
he
right?
was wearing a pirate's hat. Later,
Mhm.
I realized that was his head, and he was wearing a vest, and I couldn't really see his legs because of the darkness, but he seemed to be dancing around. However, I think that's just the way that the mantis walks.
Hmm.
And but my favorite character in books and things was Captain Hook, and he looked like Captain Hook.
So do you think that that's how he just sort of in the light that you saw him, he sort of looked like a pirate because his eyes were such a way? Or do you think that he was dissimulating, concealing himself, interfering with your perception, and making himself look like a pirate because that was something that you had an affinity for? Or
I think
do
he
you
was
think that? Mhm.
I think he was controlling my perceptions.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so that's not how it being actually looked. Um,
And as he was sort of dancing around, the room got much bigger. It was like it, and the bed began to twirl, and I was laying down and I could not move. It was like my hands were tied and stuff. And I could barely look to the side, and I could see I was not tied up. And the little guys were moving with the bed as if they were attached to it. And my guess is now, of course, that I was actually on the ship at that point, because my room couldn't get bigger. It was sheetrock and wood. And that went on for a few minutes, and I was just about to get really ready to start screaming, although I don't know if I could have, when all of a sudden the room was normal. The bed was not moving. I could move, and those little guys were gone. So I covered my head with my blanket and my pillow, and I decided that I was going to cover my head from now on, because if they came back, I just didn't want to see them because they were too strange.
Mm-hmm. And now, I wasn't clear when you told the story on experiencer interviews. Did the experiences stop at this point, or do you feel like this happened on a regular basis subsequent to this last event that you just described? Or
I know they came back, but I didn't know it. I
because
would find bruises, I'd find punctures, I wouldn't be able to sleep. Different things were going on. I was married at 21, and my wife said, "You've hurt yourself in bed more than anybody I've ever seen."
Mm-hmm.
And now, when I was 11, several different things happened when I was 11. One was the car accident. I'll tell about the car accident first.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead into that. That's interesting.
I rode my bike home with two of my friends. This was 1961, I think. Yeah. And, you know, they let us go wherever we wanted to, really, in 1961. I had a good bicycle, and bicycles at that time were made out of steel. They weren't aluminum or carbon fiber. They were really solid bicycles, and they were heavy. We were riding along the street, and we just crossed the highway, and we had just passed the crossing guard, which was a policeman that they had there every day, the city policeman. And I suddenly realized that the car in the far lane, which was coming towards me, was literally crossing the yellow line or the white lines and was coming straight at me. It was a big Dodge or Plymouth. It was a very large car, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't really have time to think. And then I was rolling on the ground, and I would come up with my eyes, and I would see the tire, the bumper, the headlight, and the sky. And I did that 3 times. I would see the ground, the tire, the bumper, the headlight, and the sky. And the third time, also, I couldn't move my body at all, which is probably good, or I would have been killed.
And that's a detail that maybe it also gives the sense that something had taken control, maybe, because ordinarily, I mean, you should have been able, even though, I mean, everything was happening fast and you were tumbling, presumably, you should have been able to move your body, but you weren't. And that's maybe a clue, right? That something odd is occurring in this.
And I realized, yes. And I realized at the time that I couldn't move my body. And then suddenly my body straightened out as I was coming up. It straightened out, and I flew through a barbed wire fence. I flew through the first and the second wire, and they're like a foot apart. And my arm did get one of the barbs dip into it, and it made a 1-inch long scar that I still have today, although it's almost gone. And I landed on the ground, and there was a lot of grass. In fact, the doctor said, well, the pasture burned a week later. The doctor said if it had burned in another visit. If it had burned before the accident, I probably would have been killed in the landing and rolling. So anyway,
Because
I
the
started to
grass
get up.
cushioned you. Because the grass cushioned you.
Tall Johnson grass, like 3 feet tall. I was getting ready to get up, and the policeman put his hand on my chest and pushed me back down. He said, "Don't move." And I said, "Well, I'm not hurt." And he said, "Well, you never know." He said, "In an accident like this, sometimes the pain doesn't show up until the next day. I've called the ambulance, and I've called your parents, and they're on their way to get you right now." And I told him my glasses were missing, and he looked around and found them. They were on the ground next to me, and he gave them to me, and I put them back on. Then it was very shortly after that the ambulance stopped. The ambulance got there from Kaufman, and they must have sped too. It's at least a 20-minute drive. They picked me up and took me to my parents' house, which was about 3 blocks away. And my mother came out, and she was very upset, but she was glad to see me. And we got in the ambulance, and she said my father was going to meet us at Kaufman, that he was taking off work the rest of the day. So we went to Kaufman, and he did get there after the doctor, and I know he talked to him, but he wasn't talking to him around me. And they gave me a tetanus shot. They said I looked fine, but they wanted to keep me overnight because sometimes the injuries show up a little later. And I said, okay. And it was then that I found out that it was my teacher's husband that had hit me.
Oh my.
And ironic. So, and he was in his 60s or 70s, and some people were saying he shouldn't have been driving, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. He was. So the next day, my father got there back at the hospital, my father and my mother, and my dad said, "Well, you've got a surprise for when you get home." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, we've got a new bicycle for you." I said, "I don't want a bicycle. I've liked my bicycle. You know, it's a good bicycle." And he said, "Well, we'll talk about it when we get home." Because he didn't want to have a fight with me, I guess. So anyway, we got in the car and we're driving home. And once before we got home, he mentioned the bicycle again. And once again, I said, "I don't want a bicycle," because I wasn't hurt anywhere. I couldn't imagine that my bicycle was hurt. You know?
Yeah. Right.
Well, we got home, and there on the porch was a brand new American Flyer. And this was like the Cadillac bicycle. It was red and white. It had streamers coming out of the handlebars. It had a pump seat. It had a light. It had a backlight. It was decked out, and even heavier than the other bike. Well, I said, "Now I've got 2 bicycles." And my father goes, "Come with me." So he takes me around to the side of the house, to the carport, and there against the wall is my bicycle. Now it's curved like a crescent moon, with the main point of impact being the seat. And when I laid it down, it was about a foot from the concrete up to the seat. So this steel bicycle had been bowed by the impact. And he probably hit me going 45 miles an hour. And it hit directly where I was sitting, maybe. Since then, I've come to believe that the minute that impact happened, I wasn't on the bicycle anymore.
Right. Yeah. Let's just do a post-mortem real quick. Yeah. So, and you wouldn't have been off the bicycle before he hit you through some kind of natural means. It's not like you saw it coming and jumped off or anything. So, yeah. So, I mean, if he hit, a solid steel bicycle like that and made it bow, I mean, you would have had to have been injured. Maybe not dead, but injured in some kind of way, a broken leg or something. you know.
Our
That just
pelvis.
definitely doesn't make sense. And I thought initially when you said about your trajectory, you're rolling, and then somehow you fly through the barbed wire of a fence, and it seems to me like that's an odd trajectory, like, but it needed to be odd because they needed to get you into that tall grass for when you landed. And so very implausible, but something took control over you, and they needed to get you over that fence so that you would have a soft impact upon landing. So that kind of explains why, if something did take control, why they would send you through the barbed wire over the fence, because that was the soft place to land. Yeah, that's very strange. I would certainly.
They needed it more for the people that were there. There was people that were watching all of this. So this would be something in their minds that they could use as an excuse to why I wasn't dead.
Right. Because a lot of times, like I know people personally, and one person personally who was saved, and she went off of a cliff when she was a child and literally slowed down. They slowed her down, so they can slow you down. They wouldn't necessarily need to put you in some kind of soft place to land. They could slow you down, but there you go. They needed there to be some kind of plausible explanation for the bystanders, but which many of them were still thinking, though, that this was miraculous, that you shouldn't have.
My father said when we were on the porch, he said that this was a miracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm going, huh? And then over time, people would tell me that God had saved my life, that Jesus had important things for me to do, or God had important things for me to do, or they had my angels were protecting me. And I'm going to get back to him later, but I had a friend that I told this story to. I used to tell these stories to everybody when I'd meet them at a new party or gathering. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and two other things happened that year that were interesting. One of them, one night, I got in bed. I had gotten a radio. I had a radio. I loved music, and this song came from England to the United States. And this is before the invasion. That was called "Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor on the Bedpost Overnight?" And the thing started playing in my head over and over and over, because it was a brainworm or earworm, whatever you want to call it. Just couldn't go to sleep. All night long I was awake. And Mom came in to fix breakfast to get me ready to go to sleep. Go to work, to school, pardon me. And she said, you got to get up and go to school. And I said, I can't go to school, Mom. She said, why? And I said, well, I didn't sleep any last night. I said, this song kept playing over and over in my head. And she just looked at me weird. And she said, okay, you get dressed and come in the kitchen. So I got into the kitchen, and she said, okay, eat your breakfast, get on the sofa, watch cartoons. I'm going to give you a soft drink. Do not go to sleep, because you are going to school tomorrow. So that's what I did. I ate breakfast. I went and sat down. And as soon as I got on the sofa, she left from the living room, you could see into the dining room, and it had a double door opening, but no doors. And then the kitchen was right around the corner. And our phone was on the wall right next to going into the kitchen. She got the phone off the wall and dialed it and went into the kitchen. And I heard her talking, but I couldn't hear the thing she said. So I watched cartoons all day, which was horrible. No, I love cartoons. So, so I watched cartoons all day, and around 4:30 or 5, my father came in, and he just walked straight past me like I wasn't even there, and he grabbed my mother by the hand and took her into the kitchen. And they had conversation that I couldn't hear what they were saying. They had muffled voices. And he comes back in, and by now the cartoons had stopped for the day, and it was a television show about a hospital. I can't remember which one. It was one of the popular ones. We didn't have very many channels. So he sits down on the edge of the sofa, and he looks at me and he said, "Son, if you don't straighten up, we're going to have to take you to a psychiatrist." And I'm going, what? I mean, I just heard a song in my head all night long. I'm not crazy. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So then he starts talking, and he said, "We don't talk about ourselves. We Lacys don't talk about ourselves. I didn't even know what happened in my mother and father's life unless I was with them. They didn't talk about themselves to anybody." And he said, "And you don't want to be famous." Now, I don't know how he thought I wanted to be famous, except I think by then I had told a teacher that I wanted to be president. So anyway, because I hadn't picked out any jobs or anything like that, he said, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, one of your relatives, she told people that little men came into her room and talked to her. Now, I'm still not getting where all this is coming from. And it was later that I went, oh, wow, he's talking about the little men when I was 6. So he said, you don't want anybody to know about any of this, and you don't want to talk about it. She talked about it, and they put her in an insane asylum. And that was the word they used for it, even in the 60s. And she died there, and you don't want that to happen to you. And I'm going, no, I don't. I didn't say anything. I just listened to him. My father was like 6'2" or to 6'4", and he looked like Dirty Harry. He had a burr haircut. I mean, he looked like Dirty Harry, and he was big. He had been a sailor, a merchant seaman, and a farmer, and a cattleman. So he was a big guy, and he never smiled. And usually you did what he told you to do unless he wasn't around. So that was the end of the conversation. There were no questions, nothing like that. I was confused, but I went on about my business for the rest of the day and got to sleep and went to school the next day.
So he immediately connected it with the 1956 events.
Yes.
And this was years later, though. Do you think that there was more that happened that because you were a child, you don't remember? Do you think that you were going through a lot more back then than you remember, as far as, complaining to your parents about, because that came out of left field for you, that he, you need to go to a psychiatrist already, just because you didn't sleep last night and had a song stuck in your head. What do you think? Does that not reveal that, that there was something more, or why did he automatically connect that with he had already, I guess, heard from your mother in 1956 about, there being beings in your room, and he started, wheels started turning, and he was thinking about the relative. Oh no, the same things happened.
He remembered it. That's what confused me. A little later, after I knew I was an abductee, I went to Dreamland Festival that was thrown by Whitley Strieber in the city where Elvis Presley lived most of his life as a star. I can't remember what the name of it. And there was a psychic medium there named Marla Freeze, and she had been the technical reference for the television show Medium in the 70s or 80s, whenever that was, or 90s, well, sometime. And she had helped police solve crimes. I think she even worked on the Green River murder, but I'm not positive. And if she did, she didn't solve it, but she helped. And in fact, I think they had a lot of people that helped them on that. So when I heard she was going to be there, I wanted to talk to her. So when we got into the meeting room, sort of like an auditorium, I think it was a basketball gym actually, I sat on the very first row, and I was used to sitting on the very last row everywhere I went, so nobody saw me or talked to me or anything. And I had brought a picture of my father with me, which was a picture of him in his merchant seaman's uniform, dress uniform, which wasn't real fancy, but it had a regular cap with a bill instead of a working cap. So anyway, she said she was going to read for 3 people. And she said, okay. And everybody was holding their hand, especially us on the front row. And she picked this woman, and I'm going, ah. So she does a reading for her, and the woman goes, that's my grandmother. And she tells her all this stuff. And anyway, she convinced the woman that she was correct. So I would imagine she was. Then she did it again, and I think that I was second. And she walked up and said, okay, you. And I handed her the picture, and she goes, oh, you came prepared. Because, see, nobody else knew that little thing that they will use pictures. Well, she took the picture and put it face against her upper leg. She didn't even look at it. And she walked back, and she fell. And anyway, she was trying to show me that my father was giving me proof that it was him. Also, because she said, well, this is something to do with the way he died. I said, yeah, he fell and broke his hip. And then they did surgery. And then he refused to let them give him the anticoagulant shot because he thought he was in a prisoner of war camp. Of course, he had never been in a prisoner of war camp. And he died. For a long time, I thought maybe it was his way of committing suicide, but I decided that that wasn't it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think he really was confused and thought that, because I've heard, you know, you can do things like that can happen when you come out from anesthesia, from surgery.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
yeah.
she told me that I was a 4th generation abductee. My parents had been abducted, my grandparents, and my great grandparents, and I was the 4th.
And hence why your mom behaved the way she did during the 1956 abduction events.
Right.
Because she had gone through it herself. She seemed to know about it. She seemed to know that, you know, that when you call for your parents and your parents come in the room, they disappear. You know, she knew because she had been through it. And then that makes sense also because the relative, during the late 1800s, you know, who saw small beings in her room, she was clearly an abductee. So that seems like it might have been accurate information. And that's doubly interesting because, you know, abduction researchers struggle to figure out how far it goes back, the abduction phenomenon. Some people believe it goes back, you know, to thousands of years ago. I think a past guest we've had on, John Carpenter, legacy abduction researcher, feels like it stretches back that far. But many people think, like Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, that, you know, the earliest, you know, direct abductees that any of these researchers have been able to interview were about like the 1920s, right? But there was some anecdotal stories of grandparents or something having contact with beings in their room, which they think puts it back at least to the late 1800s. So your testimony or that detail of it almost confirms that
Almost
it does,
confirms that
it
it
does at least go back that far to the late 1800s, if not farther.
And my great grandfather and my great great grandfather with him came here from Ireland. And Ireland is one of the places that's very much linked to alien abductions.
Oh, that's interesting. And is that because of the lore of fairies and whatnot, or
They think
yeah, yeah? Some abduction researchers think that the lore of fairies, there's a lot of commonalities in that Irish lore if you compare it with the abduction phenomenon. Interesting, though. Okay, but yeah, let's move on to the next significant event, which may be another close call accident, or what happened next.
there were two close call accidents around 69. There was one, I think it was 69. A friend of mine and I were going on a ride because we like to get out of the house. We were in the Volkswagen, which was my father's car, but we drove it. And we went down to the East Fork River because we love to go down to the river. And it was rainy and cold and wet, but it wasn't real bad. And still, we decided it was too wet for us to get out of the car. And so we were going to go on down, which would carry us to another town if we went far enough. And we go up a hill and back down. And then we're in a different kind of area, which was farmland, but it had lots of hills that were about 45 feet tall, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we're getting ready to go around one of these hills, and I like to speed. So we were going 70 miles an hour, which was legal, but going around a hill, I should have been going a little bit slower. Suddenly, the tire in the back blew out. The driver's side tire blew, and my dad said we weren't going to have any trouble with the car because he'd had the oil changed that day and put new tires on it, brand new. Mm-hmm. So the tire blew, and I had to put on the brakes. We go around the curve, which we couldn't see on the other side of it because of the mountain, even though it was a real big. We go around the curve, and cows everywhere, all over the road, all over the side of the road. And luckily, we were already slowing down, and we stopped about 12 foot from a big red and white cow. And we would have hit, if we'd hit that one, it would have been in the car with us because it was a Volkswagen Bug. And then there would have been more cows involved in the wreck too. And we probably would have been dead. Before the tire blew and we stopped and we fixed it. And my friend Ralph, he held a lighter because the holes on a Volkswagen tire the bolts go into the wheel instead of lug nuts coming out. Mm-hmm. So in near dark, I had to put this wheel on and hold it in place with my finger in the hole with the tire on it. And they're sort of heavy. So that happened before we went around the cows. And then we slowly made our way through, went a little bit past them, turned around, and then slowly went back and headed home. We'd have been dead.
So had not that flat tire happened, you would have nailed that cow at 70 miles an hour, and yes. Probably would have died or been mortally injured in some serious way.
Pretty messed up.
Yeah.
And Ralph would have been too. So then
Hmm.
I started junior college that same year or the very next year. I can't remember which. 69, in 70. Started junior college in 69 after we graduated in December. So it had to be 70. Well, anyway, 69 or 70, we started junior college, and I was in the band. I'd been in the band in high school, and they let me in the band in junior college because they needed warm bodies on the football field marching, because I wasn't a very good player. I'd been playing the trumpet part on my clarinet because I didn't like the clarinet part. So I was last chair clarinet.
Mm-hmm.
We got through most of the year and we were having homecoming. And we had a cannon that they fired for homecoming, and we had a cannon squad. Well, we played all our songs, we were through, and the band director told us to hang around, but we could talk, and we were through playing. We weren't going to play anymore. But they didn't want the crowd to thin out, you know. They wanted people still there. So I was talking to this friend of mine. He was a casual friend. I didn't know him real well, but I knew him enough to talk to him. When suddenly someone tapped me on the left shoulder, and I turn around, and it's a complete stranger. And I started to go, because I started to go, what the heck are you doing bothering me when I'm talking to somebody? I don't even know you. Well, before that could come out of my mouth, the cannon blew up. The cannon went boom. And then this stream of air went across the back of my back. And out of my eye, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my friend I'd been talking to crumble to the ground, and a few other people fell down, and they weren't hurt as bad as him. Bricks flew out of two of the buildings, just 3 or 4 bricks in one place at each of the buildings, pulverized into the air.
From the shrapnel or from the air?
From the shrapnel.
From the
they had been very enthusiastic and put 2 loads of powder in the cannon, but they had also put 2 waddings in the cannon. If they had only put 1, they'd have been okay. But because of that, the rear end of the cannon blew up, and it put 1 piece in my friend's pelvic area on the side and broke the bone in there. And it blew right across the base of my spine, so that I felt the wind where my shirt was slightly up from my pants. I felt the wind. So it passed within 2 feet of me. Well, and it hit him. I had been standing directly in front of him. It would have hit me in the base of the spine. And then I turned around to tell this guy that he probably saved my life, and he was gone. I never saw him again. I had never seen him before. It was a small junior college. You usually seen everybody, even if you didn't know them, you had seen them. He was just gone.
Was there anyone there, or did you? Was there actually someone there, or did you just have the sensation that someone tapped you on the shoulder, and maybe there was no one, and they just gave you that, or did
he was there? I turned and faced him, and I was about to start to cuss him out for being rude when, and my friend Ralph, he said he was standing there because he was a little further away, the same guy that'd been in the car, and he said he saw chunks of that metal getting into people, hitting people, and I was just standing there in the middle of it all with no problem, no scratch.
So it's interesting the varying ways that they will intervene to save your life if necessary. They're creative with it. I'm sure if there was a guy there, they had implanted the thought probably, which we know that they can do. We know that, psychic capacities. You can absolutely put a thought in someone's head. Oh, I'm going to go over here and ask this guy this or whatever. And that is how they decided to do that, and knew that it would be satisfactory, and knew that you would turn in precisely the appropriate way that you needed to in order to miss that shrapnel, which is an interesting point.
They know our future. They know everything that is going to happen to us. They've saved me in like a split second. Well, even the Cannon thing, that was a real small area of time.
Mm-hmm.
One time I was singing at a bar. This is after I knew it was an abductee, and I knew I had written my outline that y'all have seen that had everything on it because I wanted to know what was going on. And I was singing this song. I finished, and there was a guitar player that he played guitar and keyboard and had a tape going at the same time. And instead of going off the steps at the side of the stage, which I usually did, I decided to jump off the front. I thought that would look cool. Now the stage was a foot to a foot and a half tall with a concrete floor for the dance floor with wood on top of it, but no padding. It was very hard. And I get to the edge and I take this last step that would carry me off to jumping off. And I realize that my left or right foot is caught under a bundle of 4 speaker cables, heavy duty speaker cables. And they're tied down and taped down. And I realize at that point, my head is going to hit this concrete. Well, all of a sudden, and this was all happening very quick, but I couldn't move. At the same time, my left foot pushed up with the toes, and the foot dropped, and the cables fell off of it, and my body spun around to where I was facing the stage, and I sat down on the floor. I didn't, and I tried and tried to duplicate this movement at home. And every time I'd land, I would have to step backward to keep from falling over. And the audience, there was a big audience of over 100 people there that night because of a party. And the silence was like a wave. Nobody was talking. They were all looking at me. And the guitar player goes, "Oh, that's nothing, ladies and gentlemen. We practiced that." Shit, we didn't practice that.
Oh my. So that was another divine intervention or extraterrestrial intervention.
I think as I was leaving, in my mind, I said, "You." Because at the worst, I'd have just had a concussion. I mean, at the least, I'd have had a concussion.
Right. So that's what I wonder. I just pondered on this before. If they only intervene if you're going to die, or if they also have it in their interest not for you not to be seriously injured, if that's enough for them to step in. Do you think that the latter, that if you're going to be seriously injured, they don't want that either, and so they will step in events where serious injury is imminent?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. In the hospital times this year, but it was because of long-term problems that got taken care of.
Yeah, I don't know either. I have the inclination to think that they would only do this kind of thing because, it requires a display which bystanders sometimes, maybe not always, but sometimes it requires a display which bystanders will see as, something that defied the laws of physics that shouldn't have happened, which they kind of don't want, it seems. At least it seemed that way from your incident with the bike. They wanted there to be some plausible explanation so people didn't think that there was any kind of real weirdness to that. But then again, I don't know. Maybe it's possible that that they do this a lot more than we think, and it's not a whole lot of going out of their way in order to save your life. And so maybe it doesn't require imminent fatality. If it's even maybe a possibility, that you could be just permanently injured or disabled in some kind of way, maybe they do under those circumstances as well. An interesting question to delve into. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that either.
Byron, do you believe that your ancestors are stepping in to assist?
No. I have talked with my father after he passed in a car. I was driving on Alaska, which is in Texas, in East Texas, on a big lake. And all of a sudden, the car was filled with the smell of him, the way he would smell when he'd been working outside on the car in the heat. And he had a very distinctive odor. And I go, Dad? And he goes, son, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. And then the odor was gone, and I had to pull over because I started crying. But that was one time that I talked with him. But there was I don't think he could move anything or do anything like that, although he did manifest the odor.
Okay.
Which is a thing, phantom odor. That's absolutely something that happened. That's happened to me before. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that, Todd, or heard of an experience of somebody, maybe after the recent passing of a loved one, to smell something that you associate with them. I've heard a number of stories.
Yeah,
like
a lot of people, they get the like cigarette smoke, cigar smoke, perfumes, things like that. So yes, absolutely.
Sometimes I smell bread cooking in my house, and my house was built in the early 1890s, and it was originally just 2 rooms. So they cooked all their food, but for some reason I will smell bread, and I'll walk around and it's near the kitchen and then it's gone.
Yeah, see, that could definitely be indicative of, crossing into that veil when somebody was doing something at the exact same time, making the bread, for example, or maybe it was a grandmother or great grandmother. You never know, or whoever owned the house before. So absolutely,
there were 13 people in this house eventually. And it was added on to in 1900 and in 1920. And 13 is always an important, there are 13 letters in my name. I've had 13 in my phone number. I had office 103, just things like that.
Interesting.
And the house I moved the house, and it turned out, we thought it was lot 14, but somebody had moved the signs, and it was lot 13.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I have a friend who has that same situation with the number 9. Wherever she goes, 9s just follow her everywhere, her address. And she was born on the 9th, just 9s continuously all through her life. Let's move on to the sighting of, I think this was in 1961, Byron. You were at school, and there was a pretty astonishing sighting of some type of craft Go into that story.
We were in music class, and our teacher was not there that day. We had a substitute, and it was a young woman, probably in her 20s, or she's probably in her 20s. Never ever seen her before. And Seagoville was a small town. So once again, you would see lots of people that you didn't know, but you would recognize them. And I fell in love with her because she was just beautiful. So she was our teacher for the day, but she didn't know anything about music, although we didn't know much either. And we were playing the tonette. She didn't know anything about singing. So she said, let's go outside because it's warm today. Now, it was just near the end of winter. And so, like today in Texas, it was 71 degrees. The day before that, it was like 43. So it changes quickly. Well, it was a warmer day, but not too bad. She said, we're going to go do calisthenics. We were going, because we didn't want to do calisthenics. That's why we were taking music. And so she took us outside, and she stood under this huge oak tree in the shade, and she had us out on the gravel driveway that ran past the school. So she had us put our arms out and get a space between so we wouldn't hit each other. And she told us we were going to do side straddle hops. Excuse me. So we started 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all of a sudden, the nose of this ship moves up over the oak tree. And I put together models at that time, and it looked like a George Washington class nuclear submarine turned upside down with the conning tower and everything removed and replaced with the battle deck from the battleship Missouri, except the cannons, the guns, the turrets, all of those were buildings. They weren't guns, and they didn't move. And we all just froze. And we're standing there looking at it. And after just a little bit, she goes, okay, that's nothing. Now, she didn't even look up. And plus, there was a tree above her. She goes, that's nothing. We're going to get back to work. Well, so she counts, and we start doing side straddle hops, and we do about 3 or 4, and the bell rings. Now, the class was almost an hour long, and we hadn't even been out there 20 minutes, but the class was over. So there's huge missing time. Now,
well, before you go on, I don't know if you're going to talk about the subsequent regression in which you explored that experience and the missing time. I just want to say, so I believe there are multiple whistleblowers that have stated this, but I know Corey Goode has. Say what you want about Corey Goode, but I think his core secret space program experiences were probably legitimate. He says that in the 50s and maybe 60s, the initial retrofitted vehicles that they used for space travel, that they incorporated the reverse engineered technology into, that they were retrofitted submarines from that era. That because the submarine was a suitable, because it was pressurized and other various factors, which I can't remember quite clearly, the submarine just made for a suitable candidate to retrofit it into a spacecraft. And so the early, at least American space program craft were retrofitted submarines. And so, I've always wondered, has anybody seen, a submarine? I'm always wondering about the sightings of cigar shaped craft, that people see in the distance that look just like a kind of cylindrical thing, whether those aren't the retrofitted submarines. But that's what he said. Yeah, he said that the initial craft were retrofitted submarines and that they
That's
were
interesting.
just suitable for that purpose. So I find it plausible that that was in fact maybe a craft, and maybe was not an ET craft, but one of our own. And which leads to the questions, because this was essentially, as you found out later, an abduction event. Do you want to go into that now? You were all taken, right? The entire class.
After we got back inside, nobody at all hardly talked about it. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we all ended up on a social page for students from high school and grade school, all that stuff from Seagoville schools. And I asked if anybody remembered that, and I went into detail about it. Nobody said anything. And then about a month later, one of my friends said, "Hey, I remember that event." She said, "I wasn't there. I had pneumonia that week." And that's probably why I remember it so well, because when I got back to school, several people told me about it.
Byron, what
They
year
never
was that?
61.
61. Okay.
So multiple people remembered it.
And when I got home, I asked my mother if she had heard anything on the news about anything being in the sky over Seagoville.
Mm-hmm.
She said no. I think she was probably telling the truth, but she seemed like she was lying. She seemed like she didn't want to admit that she had heard anything.
Well, maybe
because they were still trying to keep me from realizing what was going on.
Well, so let's open this up a little more to the mind control facets of this, or as a past guest of ours described as the alien Xanax. She talked about an experience where, her father, who was a UFO enthusiast, finally saw something in the sky, anomalous, bright colored orbs, not of Earth origin, and just got very weird and said, "I don't want to talk about it," and walked inside and just behaved completely uncharacteristically. So the teacher in your story, it seems like something similar to that is happening here. She just completely dismissed this, which you would never do, if you're in the right state of mind. What did she say exactly, Byron? She said, "This is nothing."
She said, "This is nothing." She didn't even see it. She was under a tree. It was up above her with the tree between her and it. She didn't see anything. Why would she say it was nothing when she didn't know it was anything or not? We thought it was weird that she said that. I thought it was weird she said that.
And none of the children, right after the fact, when you went back into the school, said anything about it initially, right? It wasn't until sort of a day later or days later that they said, "Oh, yeah, I remember that now." So how many children were there? And none of them thought to mention anything about this, profoundly strange craft in the sky that looks like a submarine, which would just, you'd never hear the end of it, in a normal circumstance. That would be the event of someone's life, that they would tell everyone they knew, that they'd be talking for days about it. And
there were 12 to 18 people in the class.
Mm-hmm. And so later on, I don't know how later, maybe way later, you were at, was it a UFO conference? Was this the Whitley Strieber one that you attended,
Yes.
and there was someone in the audience who was a hypnotic regressionist or did hypnotherapy therapy of some
She was
kind.
working on being one. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
She was a nurse as well.
And then she regressed
And
you.
right.
And then what came out of that regression, if you want to go into that?
She got me into a really it was the last day and they let us out a little early. So I had told her I'd like for her to regress me, and she suggested we go to her room and do a regression. So we didn't have any other place to go, and I already checked out of my room. So we went there, and we delved into two experiences. One was that one, and I did remember walking through the ship, and I did remember that two of the young girls in our class, they're 11, were crying, and I saw some tubes that looked like they had water in it in the long hallway, as the hallway ran all the way down the length of the craft, apparently. And but I didn't see anything in them except bubbling water.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember seeing any occupants, any humans walking around? Or it seems like you couldn't really, from what you were able to recover through the regression memory wise, you were only really able to recover so much, right? Just a piece or two of that incident,
Mostly
but presumably,
what was
say again,
right
sorry.
around me. And we may have gone in a room and all sat down at chairs, but I'm not positive and I don't want to lie. So I have a vague memory of that happening, but I'm not sure.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
the other was that when I was when I had just gotten out of college and was between sophomore and junior year, during the summer, I worked at Camp Vickery in Texas. I just remember the name and then it went away. Clifton, Texas, near Clifton, Texas. And one night, well, we would always gather on the back porch, and me and three other guys would play guitars and sing, and the kids would gather around. Well, we ended up staying on a weekend. We didn't know we were supposed to before. So we stayed on a weekend, and some of the kids did stay. And once again, we played, and then we got back to our room, our cabin, and there was about four of us in the cabin, and it was midnight because we stayed up late. There was nobody around. I was the boss. So, because I was 21 and I was the only one that could be sued. So we had a good reason to make somebody a counselor. So I laid down and I couldn't go to sleep. And I turned over and the sun was coming up and it was 6 o'clock. So it had taken me 6 hours to turn over. I had no notice, and we'd been drinking a little. I was completely sober, just like back, and I felt like crap. So I asked her about that, and she said, or I said, that I saw a ship land in the field. The lodge was here. There was a huge field that had been a cattle field at one time, and then 4 cabins, and we were in the first one. And there was a street light. A ship had landed, according to my regression. A ship had landed, and they had gotten all of us out of the cabins, one cabin at a time, and had us all lined up. And everybody around me seemed like they were in a trance, but I didn't. At that point, I was totally awake. And I went up to one of the aliens and asked him, I was real concerned about this. I asked him if they had abducted everyone because of me. And he said, or he thought at me telepathically, he said, no, we were just going to take them, so we got all of you at once. And I had a feeling he was lying to me, that they really did take them because of me. So, but there was nothing I could do about that. Nobody else remembered it.
And maybe the same thing at the school, you know, why did they take everyone? I wanted to just speculate a little bit about that, you know. So in that instance, I think it was the shadow government or black ops. I don't think that's an ET craft unless they were psychically messing with you in order to, you know, mask the real appearance of the ship, and it really wasn't, you know, a submarine, which I suppose is in the realm of possibility. But if it was the government, I wonder if they weren't even in the early 60s, because of course the technology in the mainstream is not representative of what they actually have. If they were microchipping, and that's why they took everybody, that this was a opportunity to some of the whistleblowers that have come out that have given testimony relating to the reasons for MyLab abductions have said that one of the main reasons why the government abducts people is for microchipping. They're putting microchips into everyone, the population at large. And I mean, what else would they have done to you? They get you all together, and they're doing something. You know, and it's not like in the case of my labs, it's the ETs and they want genetic material. I don't think the government necessarily wants genetic material, or would, if they did, obtain it that way. They're doing something, and I would just throw out speculation that sometimes the reason could be microchipping, maybe.
Yeah, and you know what, Jim? That's a very good observation, because I was just sitting here thinking that same thing. Byron, have you ever noticed anything on you that could possibly be a chip of some sort, or some kind of implant, or?
I have 3 scoop marks on my left leg.
You know, I believe.
Do we have his photo?
Yes, I think Byron. I think Byron implanted stuff. Let me take a look here.
Yeah, let's see if we can bring up those photos. The scoop marks are traditionally thought by most abduction researchers to be areas of the skin where a genetic sample was removed, or a skin sample containing your genetics. However, if they're doing skin samples and they're abducting you, you've probably been implanted as well. It's something that abductees, as I'm sure you know, Byron, you know, talk a lot about. A lot of abductees have recovered memories of the implantation happening. Some abductees will find things protruding from their skin, little bumps where that seems like there could be a rice-sized object of some kind. Some of these objects show up on X-rays, sometimes in the head. On a number of occasions, these have been removed and looked at, only to find that, you know, there's nothing anomalous about them. They're sort of unusual, but they're composed of the same things that one would find in the body naturally, not in any kind of unusual combinations. But of course they would be, because it's generally a covert program, or thought to be a covert program, and they wouldn't want that weak spot of us finding an implant and being able to conclusively determine that it's of non-human origin. Did you find those pictures, Todd?
Just give me 1 second. I'm having some technical difficulties here.
I had my skull and neck x-rayed once to find out if there was one in there, and there wasn't. And the doctor goes, your skeleton is in better shape than mine is. And he was like 15 or 20 years younger than me.
Yeah, also something not atypical with abductees, and they're in very good health. And I got the feeling from you right off the bat when you told me that you're recording music and you're putting out a new album soon here, and you had already recorded, I think you said 12 albums or some large number. And you're
right
in your
around
70s.
In there.
You're in your
74.
70s. And you're recording music prolifically. Yeah, that's just something really not unusual with abductees. Unusual vitality. Anything else to say about the submarine incident? I guess, can we move on from that?
Sure.
Let's move to, unless you have those pictures ready, we could move to, I'd like to talk about, while we still have time, one of the really interesting experiences you had where at some point in your life you started to realize that you may have been an abductee, that you might be being taken, although you're still having kind of self-doubt through this period. And you kind of start to understand that they are monitoring you in such a fashion that they're aware of everything that you're seeing, everything that you're doing, and everything that you're thinking. And so therefore you put it together that, oh, well, then I can communicate. If they can hear what I'm thinking or hear what I'm saying, I can communicate to them. And so you start to communicate to them that you want answers about this. Do you want to start off that?
In 2009, I thought exactly what you were saying, and I said, this relationship, they're getting something from me or doing something, and it should be reciprocal, and I should get something back. Of course, I didn't think about the fact they were saving my life all the time, 10 times and all. But I went, and I knew they heard me, so I decided I'm going to ask them the same question over and over and over and over again for the rest of my life, or until I drive them crazy and they decide to give me an answer. So I went there it is. I went out in the backwoods behind my house. I own an acre, and well, I own 2 acres right here. An electric line runs through it, so they mow that every year under the electric line, and it's an easy place to walk, and it's still private. So I went out there and I started talking to them, and after about 6 hours, I got it down to where I decided I was going to say, I want to know if you're abducting me. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know if I'm crazy. So the next day, that's what I said for 6 hours in my mind, sometimes out loud. I did that for 4 or 5 days. And then I was supposed to play at a restaurant near my house, Country Kitchen. And I was playing country music at that time. Well, so they gave me the gig, of course. There was no pay. And I got my instrument set up and I started playing, and then I started forgetting the words and I started making them up. Now, of course, everybody there knew the words to all these songs, like Papa Top Again, all these country songs, 60s and 70s. So they knew I was messing up. Well, I took a short break, and this guy comes out of the audience, and he said, "Look, I'm a guitar player." He said, "I've even done it professionally," and this was true. His name was Jimmy Daniels. I had never really talked to him before. And he said, "You give me your guitar, and you get your words to the songs, and you read them while you sing, and we'll finish your set." He later ended up teaching me how to play the bass guitar and letting me sing with these other bands, and led up to me almost falling off the stage. But anyway, he was a great friend, and he died of kidney failure. He was on dialysis for a couple of years. So I finished the songs, and I had a friend there with me to help me move my equipment, because I had two big custom speakers with about 4 feet tall, 3 foot wide, and an amplifier that was an old custom amplifier. So he helped me move all that back to my house and get it right inside. And then it was getting close to midnight, so I decided to go to bed. He had left, and I've been into meditating for a long time. And I used these CDs that were published by a company called Zygon, and they had an entrainment track in them underneath ambient music type. I don't think they even called it ambient music at that time. So I got into bed, and I lay there, and I lay there, and I lay there, and I lay there, because I was all worked up from performing and everything, and I couldn't go to sleep. And after about 30 minutes, which was not a very long time, I decided this just isn't going to work. I'm going to meditate to the CD. So I started meditating to the CD, and somehow at this point, I fell asleep briefly, or I went unconscious. And then I woke up, and I was in a hammock, but it was hung from side to side instead of from end to end. And it was made out of some strange material that looked like parchment, but wasn't. I didn't know what it was. And there were some blankets in it. And I stepped out of the.
Was it Byron,
up.
was the hammock like really kind of like narrowly, were you just kind of like really wrapped in it, almost like cocooned in it, or do you have a picture? Okay, that's what I was imagining in my mind, like that. And so all of a sudden you were in your house, and then all of a sudden you're fully awake, like you're not dreaming, and you're in some kind of weird hammock. And
so I grabbed hold to the ends of it, and I pull myself out, and I land on the floor. And I realized I'm not wearing any clothes, and I hadn't been wearing any clothes when I went to bed. And I couldn't see details, and I reached up to clean my glasses. Now, I didn't have my glasses on because I'd had them off. So I had been moved from my bed directly to this place. And I'm standing there, and I go, they've done it. I'm on an alien ship. They're showing me what they were doing. And then
you're
I heard
elated,
a noise.
and you feel good about this, right? You feel like
At that point, yes, I was very excited. And then I heard some noise right outside of the open door, whatever you would call it. There wasn't a door, the opening. And I went, I'm about to see aliens. I don't know if I'm ready to see aliens. And I said a few other words too that I won't say on the air. And then everything just went to black, like the way it fades to black in a movie. But I was in it. And then it comes back, and I'm laying on this metal table, And there are three little guys, just like the ones from 1956. And there's this big creature who had a huge head. And this is where I was getting them mixed up a while ago. A huge head with two huge eyes, sort of on the side, wearing a robe. And he thinks at me, "Don't be afraid." And I immediately calmed down. Yeah, there he is. And then there's not much talking going on. And I'm naked. My knees are up with my feet on the edge of the metal bed. Then suddenly the picture zooms in somehow, and I can see it from my bed and from being in it. And then it's like I'm in my bed, and the picture turns into complete X-ray. Now, I have a friend who investigated my case, Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, and he told me you were with them, but they were making you see it from your bed. So then it flashed to X-ray, and the little guys weren't in the picture. Now, I wish they had been. I don't know what was inside of them. I could see from my neck down to my knees of my body. I could see inside of my body. And then they applied the anal probe, and it went in about 8 to 10 inches up into me. And then I was awake in my bed, and I went, wow. And then I turned over and went to sleep. Now, I never turn over and go to sleep. So somehow they had arranged that. I just went to sleep. The next morning I woke up, and it was 6. So I got a piece of paper because I remembered what that guy looked like, and I drew his picture. And then I started crying. And I didn't know why I was crying, because I was still actually excited from having been on the alien ship. But I cried for about 30 minutes, and then it stopped just a little bit, and then I cried a little bit more. And I thought maybe something out of my subconscious had been tapped into and was being released. Of course, that's just a guess.
Right.
So then the dream stopped. The crying stopped. And later that day, I went to my friend's house, and I took that picture with me. And he's the one that had told me that I was an abductee in 2009, and this was around 2009 also. So I told him about what had happened, and I said, but I've got a drawing of him here, and I know he doesn't exist. I've never seen anything like it, because I'd seen pictures of grays, so it wasn't that good at drawing. But I put it down, and he looks at a minute, and he turns around to his computer, and he types in a web page address, apparently, and there it is on the screen. And there is a drawing just like mine from a child who had been abducted by a mantis creature.
Okay, so you are not the first person to see a mantid being wearing, Todd, in our alien drawings folder, in the mantids folder, there's 2 photographs, or not photographs, excuse me, drawings, titled S. Parks Mantid or something like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Simon Parks, well-known experiencer from England, who from the earliest age that he can remember has had interactions with mantid beings. One of which, whom we're going to put up on the screen here, he referred to as Mum, because
Jim, just tell me one more time. Where's it at?
So it's in, go to Alien Drawings folder.
Okay.
Then the Mantid subfolder, and then it should be in there, and it's called S. Parks. There's two of them that he drew in crayon of a mantid being in a robe, a purple robe. Do you remember what color the robe was, Byron, that the mantid being wore in your
I think
event?
it was purple, and it reminded me of Paisley. It reminded me of Paisley. Daryl Sims said that shows they are of a high rank.
Yeah, I believe actually, if I'm not wrong, Simon Parks has said something similar to that himself. Yeah, so that's what Simon Parks claims to have encountered, a mantid being wearing a purple robe. And here's another picture.
I don't read very many books about it because I haven't wanted to influence my own story with other people's stuff. So what I say is basically what I know, what I've seen.
Right. And I like that about you. Yeah, so
they're really smart. I mean, I've had conversations psychically with them when they were in a ship and talking to me, and it wasn't about anything important. In fact, the minute I start trying to get an answer from them, they're just gone. But I can tell the intelligence of this being, it far eclipses mine.
Mm-hmm. And any more details about that? How did you? What gave you the feeling of a superior intelligence? Just what do you think it was? Is there anything additional that you could describe?
Well, sentence structure, the things he said, the size of the words. It wasn't like, hey, we've been on the ship. You know, it wasn't that kind of stuff.
So, like a complex sentence structure. That's interesting.
And you could
there's
just
another one. Why do mantis beings always appear to wear a purple cloak? That's interesting. So this is
because they're of a high rank.
Yeah, very interesting. You'd think if people were just making it up,
there's pictures
there would be a lot of
Yeah. That's too many for me to be making it up.
Right. I mean, it's just too much. And
even
like
we associate purple with royalty and with high up in the church.
True. Yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I wonder if that stems from their influence somehow, the reason why we regard purple, or if it's some kind of archetypical thing, you know, in the subconscious. I don't know.
The Aztecs thought purple was important, and they actually wrote a thing where they came down to the United States and mined this mineral that they could take back and make this purple dye out of. I think they came into Georgia, and nobody thought that the Aztecs ever came into Georgia.
Well, no, I never heard that either. That's very interesting. So what about are there any more subsequent experiences where you've had encounters that you could talk about?
No, not that I can remember right now. There have been moments when they spoke to me, like I was in Hastings and there was this movie about a guy that was buried in a box in the Middle East while he was alive. It may have been buried or something, I can't remember, but it had a really appealing cover and I wanted to watch it. Although I have claustrophobia really bad and have ever since 1956. So anyway, I'm looking at that box. I just go and I go to myself, I said, well, I'm going to get this. And this voice, and I think it was the mantis because it was just flat emotionally but smart sounding. It said,
Mhm.
"You won't be able to watch it." I said,
Mhm.
and here there are people around now hearing this one-sided conversation. I said, "Well, I want to try to watch it. I think I can. You won't be able to watch it." And I said, "Okay, well, look, I appreciate you trying to save me spending $2.50 and just throwing it away, but
Mhm.
I'm going to go ahead." And at that point, I just started thinking at him because I realized there were people looking at me. I said, "At this point, I'm going to take the movie home and try and watch it." And he didn't say anything else. That he was gone. So I brought the movie home and I put it in the VCR after I ate dinner, and I turned it on, and the screen is totally black. And then you hear a cigarette lighter go, and this guy is in a box, a plywood box, the size of a coffin. I mean, there's like 8 inches above his head and not much more on each side of him. And I go, ah, and I put my feet up on the sofa and I turn it off, and I couldn't watch it. They told me
What was the name of this movie?
it may have been buried. I don't
Oh
know. It
wow.
was a truck driver had been caught by terrorists in the Middle East. They were actually going to try and get money to give him back, and they had him buried under the dirt in a tent under the dirt in this box, this coffin,
Wow.
and they had given him a cigarette lighter.
And
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
he was flicking the lighter to try to light to see, correct? Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
and then he and that's when I stopped watching when he saw. So, and it was a, I later, I watched the movie. I watched horror shows and forced myself to watch them and not be affected by them. I mean, I watched every horror movie I could get my hands on. And then I got that movie and I was able to watch it. And it's really amazing what they do in a box. You know, they do everything a movie should do.
Oh yeah, and it's all taking place inside the box.
And one
Yeah.
person mostly.
Wow.
Well, that would be a heck of a psychological thing right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And not an
Now,
expensive movie to make.
one other time when they saved my life, after my book was written, I was, there have been a couple of times they told me not to do something, and sometimes I wouldn't do it. But then I realized, well, I wasn't finding out why they weren't telling me to do that. So sometimes I went, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be real careful. And in
What
fact,
were those?
I avoided. I was leaving the lumber yard, and they said the voice. It just goes, take the loop. I said, I don't want to take the loop. It's longer the way to get home. I want to get home as quick as I can. And it said accident. And I said, okay, I appreciate you looking out for me, but I'm going to go ahead and go home the way I had planned. However, I'm going to be very, very careful. I don't know if they heard that or not, but there was no more talking from them. And on the way home, this guy pulls in front of me, and I mean, like, I couldn't see his car below my hood, the back of his car. And I honk my horn, and he slams on his brake. And at that point, I just throw my wheel to the right because there's an exit to a different way to go home, and I get off the road. Actually, I passed him first, and then he came back up and did that stuff. So he tried to get me twice, apparently.
He tried to crash
But
into you twice.
yeah,
So it wasn't just an accident. It was someone.
The first time may have been an accident, but he got pissed off because I honked at him.
Or not. Maybe it's also possible that
insurance fraud. I thought that too. Now, the second incident, which happened after the book, I was going home from dinner, and it had just turned dark. There was no moon. I mean, it was like pitch, and there were clouds. It was all over cloudy, overcast. So it was black. And I get onto the highway because I decided to take the 75-mile-an-hour speed limit. And there's a truck there, and I'm getting ready. I start to go around him, and he passes a car in front of him. So I hold back, letting him get around, because it's hard. We're getting ready to go up a hill, and it's hard for trucks to accelerate going uphill, big trucks, diesels. So 18-wheelers. So he passes that car, and then I gun it, and I get around him. I'm going around him, and I'm halfway down the trailer. And this was a very tall truck too, big. And I notice he's coming into my lane. So I'm going, what's going on? I mean, I know he knows I'm here. So I go into the turn lane, and then he starts following me into the turn lane, and I'm going, if I slow down, I'm far enough along that he's going to hit me with the back of his trailer. So all I can do is speed up. So I hit the gas, and I got up to 77 miles an hour, and I topped the hill, and he's still beside me, but he's quit coming into my lane. Now, he could see it over the hill.
And he's speeding up too.
Yes. But at this point, I go, what the heck is that? Only I didn't say heck. There was a black band stretched across the highway that I could see, the turn lane and my two lanes, and it looked like it went into his lane. Well, and I keep going, and I'm speeding up all the time. I keep going, what is that? And then I go, oh my God, it's a flatbed truck. I was 45 feet from it at this point, going 77 miles an hour. I slammed on my brake, and I stood on it, and it would go on and off, on and off, on and off. It had anti-lock brakes. And I kept getting closer and closer and closer. Actually, before I had got on this road, they had told me to take a side road, Old North Church Road. They said, why don't you take this road? And I go, no, I want to get home. I'm anxious to get home and relax and watch TV. So anyway, I go, and I had stuff in my cab, in my seat next to me, so I couldn't lay over. And I'm getting closer and closer to this thing, and I'm 20 feet from it, and I'm going 65 miles an hour. That's how much I had slowed down, because I'm going downhill, and he's got his brakes on. And then I said, you guys aren't going to let me die this time, are you? And at that point, he hit the truck, and parts of his front end of his truck flew across the road in front of me. I could see them very plainly. And wood fell off of the truck and flew across the road. Although I don't see why it all went parallel to his truck instead of straight on to me. Well, my car stopped about 10 feet from his. So I sat there, and the guy got out of the cab in the truck next to me, and he was walking around looking at his truck. And he didn't say anything to me. And then I just felt like I should leave. So I backed up, and I was so close, I had to back up to turn around and go on back home the other way. And I looked it up, and my speed to stop at pickup going 77 miles an hour takes 350 feet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It would at that
And
speed. And you definitely
I
weren't
did it
300 feet from that flatbed
45
truck.
feet. I went to the extent. Now, what had happened was railroad tires, railroad wheels, and axles had come off of that truck and landed in the very first lane where that guy was before. And then the truck had either stalled or been stopped. And so that's why it was sitting there. But it was gone the next day. But the railroad wheels were all piled up on the side of the road, and you could see the marks on the street where they had fallen. Well, I had to go to a mechanic the next day for an oil change or something, and I told him what had happened. And he said, he looks at me, and he said, "That was a miracle." He said, "That was a miracle." He said that 3 times. And I went, "Yeah, I think so." So I knew what it was. I knew it was them.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Wow.
they knew I wasn't going to take the North Church Road. That's why they didn't even argue with me.
Right. Wow. So as far as their telepathic, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
There was no inertial effect inside of my cab. Nothing fell off the floor. See, I didn't walk forward. I didn't move. I just sat there the whole time, even though I'm standing on the brake pedal. I mean, my stuff has fallen. My hat has fallen off of the seat, going to a stop sign at regular speeds. And it was on top of a pile of books. So it's like their ships when they're turning and stuff. Somehow they could project that into my car.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's exactly what it is. And that might be commonly what they're doing when they intervene with some kind of accident, is that they are, projecting a field. I don't know, electromagnetic field of some kind that in which they have control. They might be, applying their own forces, to stop you or make you, softly impact rather than. But yeah, I think that they are doing that. There's also been just an interesting story, on this topic. Events where this was an abductee where I can't remember what led to this, but she was on the highway in her car and a tractor trailer was speeding towards her and was going to collide into her. And it literally, and she swears, I mean, this person just seems very honest to me. She swears that the truck went right through her. Like they had done something, which, I think even our government knows how to do. And this is probably something similar to like the Philadelphia experiment, where they phased either the truck or her slightly out of space-time reality. And the truck just went right through her, went right through the car, and didn't hit anything, yeah, it's really incredible. And so you had 9 occasions, I think, right? You said in your life where you probably should have 9.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, wow.
It was 9, but then another one happened after I wrote the book.
Oh, is that right? A very recent one, like just in recent years?
It was it was right before COVID.
Do you want to tell about that one? Have you spoken about this one at all?
That's what we just talked about.
Oh, that was that one.
Truck.
The truck one. Okay, I see. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, this is
when I wrote down that resume, or I just thought it was a list, it ended up being the outline for my book. But when I wrote it down, I went, wow, I would not, I was really didn't like them. I was upset. And I read all that and I went, I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for them. They've saved my life 9 times. And all of a sudden, I didn't dislike them anymore.
So you did generally throughout your life have ill feelings towards them, which is not uncommon, you know,
Well,
but until
not until 2009, because I didn't know about them. After the first time, now I remembered that off and on. Usually I'd forget it for a year or two, and then all of a sudden I'd remember them. And there was a period where I thought about them every day, just so I would remember, because I saw this tending to forget. But in 2009, when my friend told me I was an abductee, I saw a portal open up over the road on North Street, our biggest road, in front of Walmart, a stoplight, and it looked like a swirling disc of water that just suddenly grew from a foot to about 6 feet. And it looked like the center of the time gate with the movie from Kurt Reynolds or whatever that was called.
Kurt Russell.
And
Stargate.
Stargate. It looked just like that, except no frame. And there were cars all around me and nobody saw it. Nobody was reacting to it, nothing. And I moved my head around to make sure, and it would stay where it was. It wouldn't move with my head. It wasn't a hallucination. And then it exploded, but no noise. And then it was gone before it hit the ground. I told my friend about that, and he didn't say a word. So the next week on the same day, about the same time, the same thing happened. And I didn't call him and tell him, but the next day I went to his house. We were going to walk the creek, and I told him all about it. And then we went back home, and I said, and he didn't say anything. I said, what do you think this is? Do you have an opinion? You always have an opinion about everything. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, what do you think it is? And he said, do you want to know? I said, yes, I want to know. He said, are you sure you really want to know? Because once I tell you, then you'll know. I go, okay, yeah, tell me. He goes, I think you're an abductee. I've listened to all your stories and I've always sort of thought that, but this last one, it just makes total sense. And I said, you're crazy. And he told me to go look at this web. He gave me 2 web addresses and said, go look at these web addresses. So it took me a week to do that, maybe 2. Finally, he pestered me so much, I read them. And they had 90 questions. And they said, if you answer so many of these, then you're an abductee, or you should look into it because you're probably an abductee. Well, every one of the questions except the one for women, I answered yes on both those. And I also saw a link for PTSD, and I looked that up and I realized I've had PTSD. I don't have it now. I guess I still have childhood trauma, but I knew I was an abductee then. And that's when a few days later, he told me he'd seen the show with Whitley Strieber in Memphis, that I should go.
When was the last, before we'll have to wrap it up here in a second, but when was are you still getting communication to this day, or before the truck incident around COVID, you had a telepathic communication then, right? Before that accident, telling you to take,
right,
why don't you go this road? So you've had a communication as recently as 2020 from these beings, presumably the manted beings.
There's some things that I think is communication because I don't know how I could have thought it up. Like right before I wrote my book, they played they made this music play on my CD, the Zygon CD that I'd heard 1,000 times that wasn't on there. And it was the root of the kind of music that I do now, except I use synthesizers and they had used an orchestra. So, and there are other times I just think things that there's really no reason for me to think that or know that.
Yeah, well, before we go, one more thing. So is there anything additional you want to say about, you were telling me, texting about, you feel like the ETs have influenced you in some subtle kind of way to record music, and you think that the music you're recording is in some weird way resembling a music that you heard or that they played for you, or
That I
you're trying to replicate some kind of music. Where did you hear this music?
I heard it through headphones with this CD from Zygon, but the Zygon sounds weren't playing. It was this strange music. Now, this was right before I wrote my book, and I wanted to play this music, and I felt that I should, but I got involved in writing the book, and I just decided, I'd even bought my mini Korg synthesizer.
Is that a micro
Because
Korg?
Micro Korg, yes. I realized that I could use a synthesizer, which I had used a long time ago, but not very well, to write these songs, because that was the first hurdle, was just to figure out how the heck to do it. And then I also realized that if I put a strong drum beat with it and always started and stopped on the beat, that it would give it a certain amount of order so I could just do whatever I wanted to do. And my first songs were a little bit more melodic than they are now. Then I started writing the book. It took a year to write the book. Then I started trying to learn to play the synthesizer, and I went, this is never going to happen. I was trying to learn to play keyboards. So I didn't know where middle C was, and that was my anchor. And I know to go 1, 3, 5. If you get on a certain note, it's either the 1, the 3, or the 5 that you can play, and then the next one that will lead you back to being where you started, or in tune with where you started. I don't remember all that stuff. Jimmy taught me a little bit of it, and he always used numbers. He didn't actually say the notes the way I do. So I knew those two things, and I was able to start doing what I wanted to do and exploring. Then I read about avant-garde music a little bit. I didn't study it, but I read about it, and I went, well, I'm sort of doing that already.
What kind of music?
But it avant-garde.
Oh, okay.
And then I read about experimental music, and I talked to an AI voice just recently, and he said that I'm doing more experimental than avant-garde, because they do stay within the rules a little bit more than you do. You just do whatever the hell you want to do. And my music will put you in a trance. If you put on headphones and you listen to it, and it's easier to listen to it than ambient music, or even some music with words, because you get carried away with the words and the emotions. There's no emotions. And I realized at one point that my emotions were coming from the music the songs I was listening to. And songs can tend to be depressive. So for like 2 or 3 years, I listened to nothing but my music. No vocalization whatsoever.
And that's very interesting, because there is a lot of from talking to others, tones and frequencies and things of that nature that can work to communicate with different beings.
Yeah, it's tied into sound and frequency for sure.
Yes.
So there.
Yeah.
Can you recommend a song for me from one of your albums, Byron? Do you is a good one in particular to go into a trance state from? If I were to try this, is there a better song than others on one of your albums?
A few of the songs, I think some of them are from the album Byron Lacy, and they have one-word titles, and some of them are from you again with one-word titles like Breathe. I can't remember.
Do you have a YouTube channel, Byron?
Yes. There. Yes, I have a YouTube channel, and of course, something that works for me might work differently for you.
Right, true. Yeah. But I would like to, experiment with this.
My two newest albums, AI Girl, My AI Girl, or something like that, and then the Gray album, which is a play on the White album, but it's a gray and it's got a picture of a gray.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Oh, come on. Oh, and also Star-Crossed Lovers has some pretty meditative songs on it as well.
Interesting. Okay.
But like I've meditated to all of them.
Sorry, say that again.
I've meditated to all of them, and I can listen to an album for days at a time and not get tired of them and not memorize them. It's very hard to memorize music.
That's interesting, particularly interesting to me. I'm the opposite with music, even my own music. I have to constantly move. I can hardly even write a song or persist through the process of writing a song because I get tired of it so quickly and I want to move on to some new sounds or something different, So I'll record a loop, I use an Akai MPC Key 61 for a lot of stuff. And then I just get sick of things so quick that I just have to move on, and I just can't be patient most times in trying to finish a song. But that's interesting. I wonder why that is, that you have this, your music's doing something for you. I just feel like there's something more there. There's some kind of something deeper, than just some deeper process maybe going on than just you being satisfied by the music,
like
or something.
Fall through a hole, mentally, just like I go into a different state of consciousness, and sometimes I'll be laying there and go, "This is over. What happened?"
Yeah.
But I won't have gone to the loop.
Have you ever had, listening to your own music, I remember in the Experiencers interview show, you said that you were listening to, I think maybe the Zygon meditation tracks, and all of a sudden you went out of body and fell through the rocking chair, fell through the house and the planet. You just went straight down out of body, and then encountered.
Yes, I was wanting to learn. I was wanting to learn how to meditate, and I was going to spend $20 on lessons, which was a lot of money in 1971 or 72. And I suddenly thought, I know how to meditate. And I made my mind blank, and then it was that suddenly that I fell right through the chair and through the floor and through the earth, and there was total blackness around me, and I was gone, and I could see this little figure that was about an inch tall that looked like an exact replica of me. And the next day, my wife found it in a book on Eastern mysticism, and it was called the Atman, which is a blueprint for your body and your soul. And I had never studied anything about Eastern mysticism, but she started from then on, and we both started meditating.
Well, that's a really intriguing thought, that there's a blueprint out there that exists somewhere for each one of us, maybe. Which
supposed to be,
yeah, very
Which
interesting.
I would definitely like to find out more about. That's for sure. So maybe we can bring you back on for round 2, Byron, and explore that a little bit more.
I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. I am very fascinated with that. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Byron, it has been an incredible experience being here, listening to your story, and it's just some of the things, it just makes you think, you know what I mean? Some of the things like your music, possible communications through the music, it's so fascinating. Your story is it's incredible. I'm so glad that you gave us your time to come on and visit with us for a bit.
I have a new album that will be out on the 3rd, and I think it's my best. Of course, I think that about every one of them, but I believe they do improve. And my book, Chosen Chronicles of an Alien Abductee, is available on Amazon.com. You showed a picture of it, and you just look up my name on the internet, and you'll find stuff about me.
Yes, Amazon, type in Byron Lacy. If you put a little dash and then alien, his book will come right up. He has a lot of books on there. You can check out his other works as well. Byron, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do it? Do you have a website, or do you have email that people can contact you?
Yes, you could. It's all little letters, Byron Lacy 21. The 21 are numbers at yahoo.com. And I do have a website that's www.byronlacy.com. But if they put in my name, that's going to pop up too. There's a lot of stuff on there about me.
Yes, and I will also I will post your links in the comments section of our video. That way people can check more about you, because usually what happens is people, they hear these stories, these experiences, and something might click with them, and they can be like, oh wow, you know what, I had something very similar to Byron had, so I want to contact him and learn a little more. So yes, we are big on collaboration. So if people hear things and they want information directly from the source, they can go straight to you, or they can contact us, and we can help get them in contact with you as well.
Either one.
All right.
Great.
Well,
really
yes, I'm excited. I'm very happy, and I'm so glad that you came on and gave us your time. I'm incredibly blessed to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jim, anything else you want to say?
No, I guess that's it. Yeah, I just want to say also, yeah, that I really enjoyed this. Very interesting. The music aspect of it really intrigues me. Any sort of thought of music from outside humanity, I just I've always had just such an interest in wanting to know, what extraterrestrial music is like, and maybe there is, some hint of it or more, in your music, and I think that that's just a really intriguing thing to me. So I really enjoyed this, and yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please, everybody, go check out Byron Lacy. Type him in online on YouTube, his website, Amazon. Really good guy, and we want to thank everybody for tuning in with us and participating and joining along. So thank you, everybody, so much. We'll see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Thanks, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.